Hi, I'm Beth Comstock. Thanks for joining us here for this latest edition of the Changemakers Book Club. Simon, thank you so much. I'm here with Simon Sinek. I probably don't even need to introduce you, but let's do it for maybe the one person who tuned in and doesn't know you. So let me do a little bit of a setup. First of all, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Really
Yeah.
an honor. Everybody's been very excited to have you. We've been seeing a lot of conversation and engagement about you doing this. So thank you for being so accessible.
Of course.
Why Simon? Why are we talking about this? Simon is an author, a creator, a motivator, the author of several books. I decided to focus on Start With Why, but we're going to talk about all of your books. Why this book? Why now? Part of what we're trying to do is just talk about change and how people sort of navigate their way through change. And I feel like Start With Why is an essential for business, but it's a real essential for change. If you don't know why you have to change, why are you going to do anything? So that's just a bit of the context. And to set the stage for everybody who's participating now, we want to hear from you. So please, tee up questions. I've got my iPad here. We'll bubble up questions for
Perfect.
Simon. And several people gave us questions in advance, so I'll ask you some of those. So, let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely,
so you wrote Start With Why, and it's about leadership, right? It's
Yeah.
about inspirational leadership. You wrote it almost a decade ago, yet it's a blockbuster still. Why did you write Why? Why?
So all my work is semi-autobiographical. I reached a point in my own career where I'd fallen out of love with my own work. And people gave me stupid advice, like, find your passion, follow, love what you do, find your bliss. It's all accurate, but what am I supposed to do on Monday?
Yeah.
And I found it was accurate but unactionable. And in this sort of dark period, I was also very embarrassed. Superficially, my life was good. And so I didn't want to admit to anybody that I didn't want to wake up and do it again. And so I spent a lot of days lying, hiding, and faking, investing a lot of energy pretending that I was happier, more successful, and more in control than I felt. It's not a good way to live a life. And so it was the journey that I went on to sort of solve my own problem that I made this discovery based on brain decision-making, not some management theory, that every single one of us, every single organization on the planet functions on 3 levels: what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And I knew what I did, and I knew what made me stand out in the marketplace or in the crowd, but I couldn't tell you why I was doing it. And I realized until I answered that question, I would be out of balance.
So you were troubled that you couldn't figure out the why.
I was troubled that I
Was it an epiphany? Was it a gradual gnawing at you that just was like, I got to do this?
I reached a point where I really hated my work, and yet I was doing the same thing that I'd been doing for years.
What were you doing at the
I had a
time?
marketing consultancy at the time. And we had good clients. We had grade A clients. GE was one of them back in the day.
Hope it wasn't us.
GE Silicones, yeah.
We now know why.
That doesn't even
I
exist
hope
anymore. And we did great work, but I could find no joy in it, which is really a sad way to be. It was much more of an evolution. It was so powerful and so effective in my life at restoring my passion that I immediately shared it with my friends. And my friends wanted me to share it with their friends. And people just kept inviting me to help them find their why. And I just kept saying yes. And that it's literally been a completely organic journey.
When you were a kid, did you ask your parents why a lot?
I was that kid.
They're like, yeah, we knew you were this was going to be your life?
I was that kid.
What were you like when you were a kid?
I was I was curious and nerdy. I had a lot of diverse interests. And I was creative. I liked tinkering things. I was one of those kids who liked to take apart my toys. I used to play in my head more than in real life. Some people would take toy soldiers and go psh, 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 and I didn't do that. I would lay them out in these elaborate scenes mimicking what was going on in my head, and then come down the next day and move it slightly because the game had advanced in my imagination.
I noticed in doing some research about you that you studied anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
Has that inspired you in any way, do you think?
Oh, 100%. I studied cultural anthropology in college and learned about ethnography, which is about the researcher putting themselves in the environment that they're studying rather than bringing people into a focus group in an artificial environment like that. Immersive research. And my interest was always Western urban culture. My colleagues were interested in sort of Amazonian tribes, and I was interested in the world around me. But I learned a discipline and remain curious about the world around me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you put those two together. I studied biology, but I secretly was a closet anthropologist. I took as many classes in school as I could.
It was good stuff.
There's something about understanding the why, right? I mean, it really is, why do people behave how they do?
And it's a young social science, and it's less established than psychology and sociology, so there aren't the same fixed schools of thought. You don't have to declare yourself a Jungian or a Freudian. You can make words up, and it's a pretty, you can study the individual or the group and justify it all within anthropology.
Do you have a favorite of those kind of thinkers who inspired you over the years?
No, not really. It's the discipline of anthropology that I appreciate, and it's learning how to ask questions and learning how to pay attention to the world around me that I learn the most from that.
So speaking of asking questions, you encourage everybody to ask the question, what gets you up in the morning?
Yeah.
Why does your organization exist? And how do those are the two fundamental questions, I
Sure.
think. So give us your why. Why do you get up every morning?
Sure.
You told us before how you got to why, but
Sure.
why do you get up every morning? And most importantly, maybe, what inspires you daily?
Sure. So my why is crystal clear, and it has been since I was able to put words to it. I wake up every single day to inspire people to do what inspires them, so that they and we can change our world for the better, and do it together. And I have a vision of the world that does not yet exist. I imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired to go to work, feel safe when they're there, and return home fulfilled at the end
Can
of
you
the
say
day.
that again, because I think it's so powerful.
Yeah.
So feel safe.
Inspired to go to work in the morning, feel safe when they're there, and return home fulfilled at the end of the day. Which means there have to be something that calls us. It's not a job, it's a calling. It literally calls us to work in the morning. That our leaders have created environments in which we feel that people have our backs, that people want to see us grow, that we can take responsible risks, that we can admit when we've made mistakes. We don't have to hide them and wait for them to compound. We can admit when there are gaps in our training and ask for the company to fill those gaps. That we can compete with each other rather than against each other. This is what work should be like. The irony is, it's actually the way capitalism is designed to work. And the companies that are able to create these kinds of cultures are more innovative. They outperform their competition over the long term. They're much more stable. They have lower churn numbers with their employees. They tend to be higher functioning organizations. That's the great irony of my work, which is, though it's idealistic, it's actually good for business.
It's so interesting the way you put those together, because it doesn't seem like a lot to ask for, yet at the same time it's such a great vision. And I read a statistic recently, a couple of studies, I think more than 40% of people who were asked in the UK and the US said they are doing meaningless work.
Yeah.
That makes you sad.
And other numbers are higher.
Higher.
80 to 90% of people say that they're not doing work that they love. Those are depressing numbers to me. It's none of the things that I and those like me are difficult. I think the reason companies don't do it, quite frankly, because that's the big question: why don't they do it? Because it's not brain surgery.
But it must be. It's hard.
It's the same discipline as being a parent, which is it's a practice. It's the same discipline as getting into shape or eating healthy. You cannot go to the gym for 9 hours and get into shape. But if you work out every single day for 20 minutes, you will get into shape. This is the same thing.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. Building a strong corporate culture is more about consistency than intensity. And because of external pressures, and sometimes internal pressures, companies just prefer to apply intensity to solve problems. So layoffs, for example, on an annualized basis, are just easier, because I can commit the action and I can show you the savings the next day, as opposed to actually building strong corporate culture, which is a discipline. And I can't tell you, like going to the gym or eating healthy, exactly which day you're going to be in shape, but I know for a fact it's going to work.
And if you don't do it.
And the other problem is companies like to solve problems and then go on to the next thing. Again, intensity versus consistency. Like going to the gym, like eating healthy. Once you're in shape, you actually have to keep going to the gym and keep eating healthy. You don't get to stop. It is a daily practice, forever.
Yeah.
Like being a good parent. Like, I don't know what day your kids are going to turn out great. I just know you have to be a good parent every day of your life. And you can screw up, but on balance, the consistency is more important than intensity. Taking your kids to Disneyland once doesn't make your kids grow up with a strong set of values and strong confidence. And I think companies, given external pressures and how goals are becoming more and more short-term, they choose the expedient of the responsible.
So we're getting lots of questions. So a reminder, send us your questions for Simon Sinek. We're going to talk about anything you want to talk about. I've highlighted start with why, but so this is from Nick Keeping, and he says, Simon, how can I stay constantly motivated? I found my passion, but sometimes things get on top of me, and I feel like I never have time. So I think a lot of people feel this. I get you, Simon, but I don't have time to follow my why. Find my why, follow my passion.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's the forest and there's the trees, right? We have to be able to see the forest, which is the why, but sometimes we do get lost in the daily grind. I am the same. I think what's really important is to be reminded constantly of the context. In other words, the daily grind is not in a vacuum, and it serves a higher purpose, and we must be reminded of that. So I've surrounded myself with pictures and stories and quotes and people around me who are constantly reminding me. There's some wonderful studies on this, that when we connect with human beings who are the recipients of whatever it is we're trying to advance in the world, we're more likely to stay inspired to commit to that cause. In other words, when it becomes less abstract, it's not about words on the wall. For example, there was Wharton did a study where there was a group of volunteers who worked to raise money for a scholarship. So they worked the phone banks. And they brought in any number of consultants to rewrite the script for them with minor impact. And what the researchers did is they brought in one of the recipients of the scholarship to talk to the volunteers. You ready for this? For 5 minutes.
Wow.
And the numbers improved 300%.
Wow.
Because I could
That's
connect.
a pretty good return.
I could connect my work to a human being.
Yeah.
Wells Fargo gave it a try, where there was a loan department, a small business loan department, I think, somewhere in the South or Midwest, and they brought in recipients of the small business loans to come and talk to the loan officers, and again, the dramatically increased numbers, because it wasn't about the script and it wasn't about the sales numbers. It was about being able to connect my work to a human being, which gives my work meaning and value.
Yeah.
And they focused less on the monthly numbers and more on the people, and lo and behold, the numbers went up.
It's so counterintuitive. I mean, I think you see this in companies all the time. You know, who gets out of bed for a number? Very few people. I mean, even if you're the CFO of a company in finance, you do it for more than just the numbers.
There are some people who do it for the short-term selfish gains, and though they may get the numbers, it doesn't breed joy, it doesn't breed fulfillment, and at the end of the day, it doesn't breed love or loyalty, and it becomes a transactional relationship, which is not a fulfilling one for anyone.
So I was thinking as I went back and reread the book, getting ready for today, almost a decade ago, and the companies you highlight in the book then are still very relevant. I'd love you to talk about that. So it was Southwest, Disney, Apple. There may have been a few others that stood out, and so I'd love you to talk about why you think they've still withstood the test of time, and then who else would be, if you were to rewrite this book today, are there any other companies that you think we could look to for inspiration?
Well, I think so long as they focus on the why and continue to focus on the why, they will remain relevant because it keeps the people inspired. We've seen blips inside companies where they went off the rails. We saw Microsoft under Steve Ballmer become much more focused on the short-term numbers, and it really undermined the culture.
Yeah.
And now that Satya's there, it's really starting to restore its luster.
Satya seems like such a why leader.
He's such a why leader, and we saw the same thing at Walmart. You know, Sam Walton was such a people-focused person, and people used to rally to get Walmart to come into their communities, to come in, and let them into industries, and then they became detested. You know, by the time you got to Mike Duke, who was so short-term focused and so concerned about growth over anything else, it really broke the culture internally and externally. Doug McMillan is in there trying to restore the luster, go back to the why. I think he's making a good run of it. Doug Parker over at American Airlines, I think he's also making a run of it. Here's a company that's been plagued by mistrust and cynicism for years, where the people just don't even trust each other. And he's working very hard to make it a highly functioning, strong culture, which at that scale, if Doug Parker can do it, anyone can do it. I mean, because that company is hundreds of thousands deep. Yeah.
Tough challenge. So a question from Jim Proler, and he says, he is asking a question of Simon, what if the company culture doesn't flow well with your general vision and philosophy? Do you leave, or do you fight the good fight to make a difference in your current org? I think a lot of people can relate to that, right?
So look, leaving it is always an option, but the good news, it's not the only option, and it's not always the best option. We get this question a fair bit, to be honest with you, which is, I'm in middle management, senior management doesn't get it, what do I do? And the answer is, you be the leader you wish you had. Don't worry about what senior leadership does. You can't control them. Worry about the things you can control. Wake up every single morning with a single focus, a single purpose, to inspire the people to the left of you, to inspire the people to the right of you, to ensure that the people with whom you work, even if it's your boss, one level up, to ensure that the people with whom you work love coming to work. You commit yourself to being that leader. And what you find is these little pockets of beauty that show up inside businesses. And they tend to be higher performing, they tend to have better retention, they tend to be more innovative, their numbers tend to improve, and the people who work there tend to really love working there. We saw this happen at Microsoft. This was in the bomber days. There was a small little operations group, small budget, 10 or 20 million, with a small team, maybe 10 or 15 people, and they committed to taking care of each other. They committed to this leadership journey.
Did they say it out loud to
Yes,
each other?
yes,
So
absolutely.
They all had,
It became-
was
it
there
became-
a breaking
it-
point that they said, like, we got to trust each other?
I went in to work with the leader of that group to help them articulate their why, to help them understand their hows and how to build a culture around each other and around people. And not only did they become something like a $90 or $100 million unit with 100 people that very quickly, the thing that I found that none of us expected was word got out in the company. And the phone started ringing from all across Microsoft saying, how do I get a job in your group? Because it turned out people would talk about how much they loved going to work, and other people got jealous. They wanted to work there too. So that was something none of us expected that I'm actually really proud of.
You should be proud of
Yeah.
that. So along those lines, Rhonda McBain's asking, and I think this theme about leadership is really is resonating, as you'd imagine. When you're not in a leadership role in the office, how can you still introduce positive change in an otherwise toxic work environment? So again, this same theme
Comes up,
how do okay, I got you, Simon. I'm supposed to inspire others.
Right.
How do I do that? And it's even harder if the environment's toxic.
Look, if it's that toxic, then if your health is suffering, and there are environments that the leaders are so bad, it increases anxiety, which increases chances of heart disease and depression and some cancers, and I mean it's a real biological problem. Toxic environments can actually affect our health, but if few and far between are businesses that toxic. I'm a great proponent of having a leadership buddy. Leadership is very difficult, and it often comes with great personal sacrifice. Speaking truth to power comes with risk. Putting yourself in between a toxic leader to protect your people means you could get in trouble or lose your job. The risks are very real, and just as a good family often has two people, to help raise the family because it's easier. So does good businesses have partnerships.
Yeah.
And good leaders, there's a leadership buddy. I strongly recommend that whether it's a colleague or a friend or somebody outside, that you commit to seeing someone who you believe in becoming the great kind of leader that you know the world needs. So it's not about asking, it's about giving.
Give me an example how that might.
So you may have a friend that you admire, that you think really gets this stuff. Call them up and say, I want to be by your side. I want to be at your back. I know that what you do is hard, and sometimes it's lonely, and sometimes you're frustrated. Call me.
That's such a good point. People don't often recognize that
Leadership,
people, they want friends. They want someone, especially when they're doing risky work.
You don't go scuba diving by yourself. You don't go hiking by yourself, because dangerous things, and you need a buddy.
Yeah.
Leadership is dangerous and difficult and hard and sometimes thankless and lonely. And if you have to do it with someone. Not to mention the fact that it makes us much more courageous. A trapeze artist, a world-famous trapeze artist, would never try a brand new death-defying act without a net for the first time. You be that net. And that actually gives someone courage to do difficult things. And here's the best part. If you commit yourself to seeing that someone else rises to become a great leader, they will see that you become a great leader too. It becomes a real partnership. But you got to have a leadership buddy. I have leadership buddies. We call each other up. We ask for help. We call each other up when we're angry and frustrated. I get to vent to my leadership buddy, not to my team. I get it all out.
I hear you're also talking a lot about trust. I mean, there's an implicit trust. It's
a safe space. That's why they're your buddy. And I tend to like it. I tend to recommend. This is where mentorship gets screwed up, I think. We often confuse mentors and champions. If there is a good mentor has no control over your career. A good mentor, you can't call them for a favor to put in a good word for you to your boss. That's a champion. They're valuable. A mentor has no vested interest in your career but to see that you as a human being do well. And so a good mentor, like a good buddy, just gives you honest, candid advice, and you can go and vent with no fear that it's going to affect your career because they're not even at your company.
Yeah, you're looking out for each other.
You're looking out for each other.
In fact, you called your last book "Together."
Together is better. Together is better. It's too hard to do these things by yourself, so don't kid yourself.
So a couple of other questions. Myers Beard has a couple of questions. Let me try to condense them here. But Myers is asking, talking about big companies, and we talked earlier about Microsoft and American Airlines. He asked, what suggestions do you have for aligning your why with successfully carrying out your why in a large organization? So the way I interpret that is, I look at GE, a big company. We wrap ourselves around one brand, and there's a certain why we exist as a company. Each of our business units, I could point you to GE, I could talk to you about GE, we sort of we power, build, move, cure the world to make the world work better. At aviation, they talk about lifting people up and bringing them home safely. Yet, at an individual unit and team, you still have maybe different whys.
Yeah, sure.
So is that how you'd advise people in big companies? I mean, where does the why start?
Sure. You guys okay? You're good? Okay. There's macro and there's micro. Right? So here's the analogy. The United States of America has a why, and it was beautifully codified for us in the Declaration of Independence. We know why this country was founded. All men are created equal, or people are created equal, endowed with unalienable rights. And that sets sort of the culture of America. Now within America, there are subcultures. There is North and South. There's East and West, and there are states. Los Angeles has an entirely different culture from New York. They are both distinctly American cities. Los Angeles wouldn't work in France. They're definitely American, but they're different. So once you decide you want to work for the company because you believe in their cause, then the next question is, where in the company? There's subcultures that you will belong in one more than another. And of course we have our own neighborhoods. Yeah. That's the division I work for. And it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so to know your own personal why helps you as an individual navigate where you belong, helps you understand where you're a good fit, and more important, it helps you understand your unique contribution to your neighborhood, to your city, to your state, to your nation. I mean, it builds all the way up.
Meyer's second question is along those lines. He's asking both of us what were our whys early in our careers, and how have they changed. And I mean, you talked about that already. I think for myself, the why I started out with is very different than now. I think experience allows you to be much more thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
But I wish I had thought about my why early in my career. Do you try to get to people early on?
I would push you on that a little bit because our why as individuals. Our why is ostensibly an origin story for individuals or organizations.
And what do you mean by an origin
story? So it's
story?
where we come from, right? So why the company was founded. In our case, how we grew up. So our whys as individuals is fully formed by the time we're probably in our late teens. The youngest person I've managed to do a why with was 16 years old. It's the sum total of how we were raised, our parents, the experiences we had, and made us who we are. And the rest of our lives simply offer us opportunities to live in balance with that or not. It's just there's more data available. Yeah. And so your why doesn't change ever. It's simply are you living consistent and in balance with your why or not? And if we've all had the experience throughout our entire careers at every age where we've been in the flow, whatever you want to call it, where we've accidentally found ourselves in a position where this is wonderful and all cylinders are firing. That's because we're allowing that balance to be achieved accidentally. And sometimes it hits. Yeah. Throw enough spaghetti against the wall, some of it sticks. But to do it prescriptively, knowing your why allows those feelings and allows that kind of productivity and invention to happen more regularly because you're controlling the environments in which you naturally thrive as opposed
So, I
to
mean,
simply
I feel like
waiting.
you should be teaching this in every high school.
I
maybe
wish
even
it were
earlier,
taught. I
right?
wish it were
Because-
taught in high school. I wish we helped high school juniors and seniors learn their why. It would absolutely set them up where to go to college.
I wish I had.
I wish I
this
knew
process.
too. I
yeah,
know.
I think I would have been much smarter about choosing.
All of us.
It's the filter you're saying.
It's the filter, and right now we pick and choose. Sometimes for the think about it. Our college guidance counselors, our high school guidance counselors, and college deans ask us this question: what do you want to do with your life?
Yeah.
But they never ask us why.
Why? It's a lot of pressure.
Or they say get a job, but they never say get a job you love.
Yeah.
And these are different
It
standards.
would help parents. We talk a lot here at G about the future of work. Where is it going?
Mm-hmm.
And if parents know the aptitude of their children, they can better direct them along with their passion and their why. And I think we've maybe lost some of that.
And we help people find a subject. I went through a very personal experience when I was in high school that I think probably helped put me on this path, which is all of my friends were all the nerdy kids who all had a subject. One was brilliant at math. Another one was a brilliant historian. Another one was an amazing writer. And I did fine in all of my classes. I never was great in any one. And so I had this huge stress as a kid, which is I didn't know my subject, and so I had to look beyond that. I had to realize and try and figure out that I had skills or abilities that didn't fit neatly in a high school curriculum. And I think that's what the question why does, is it allows us to have a broader view of who we are that 99 times out of 100 won't correlate neatly with whatever textbooks we're reading at the time.
So I'm going to take a few more questions as well. We're getting lots of questions. I know some people are complaining about audio. We've checked it here. Hopefully we're working through it. It seems to be internet connection, but we're also going to replay this later. So a couple of things that are coming out. We're talking about people thinking about this when they're young. Let's talk about millennials. Your latest book. You've just come out with a new version of Leaders Eat Last, and you have really kind of the millennial handbook of sorts in here.
A portion of it.
How to lead millennials.
Yeah, there was that we expanded one of the chapters.
And you've got many questions about this, by the way.
I bet.
So people really want to talk about this.
So I get asked this question everywhere I go, every meeting that I have, any advice that I'm brought in to offer, every perspective, even every speaking engagement, someone will raise their hand and ask me the millennial question, that apparently this young generation is hard to lead. And so I fashioned an answer. And it came up in one of these interviews that I did, and I gave the answer that I'd been giving. And it went viral on the internet for a week, which was astonishing to watch. And a lot of that information came from the research that I did when I first wrote Leaders Eat Last. So we felt the only responsible thing to do, because it was already a few years old, was to go back and update it. And so that's what we did. And we did some more research, found some new studies, and updated the chapter, which I'm really proud of. But we also added an appendix at the end where we give advice for parents, advice for companies, and advice for millennials themselves, actually how to lead millennials and how to sort of function in the world. All very positive stuff.
What are a couple of key suggestions you can offer?
So one of the things that we encourage from companies is millennials, yes, like any generation, there's positives and negatives that come just from the times in which they grew up. Millennials have a huge advantage over the rest of us, which is they've grown up in a public-facing social media world, and they have an instinct and a knowledge about personal branding. They're very good at it. They understand what it means. They don't have to be taught what branding is. They're just naturally good branders. And I think older generations should really ask them for advice on branding. They're naturally very good at it, or push them in those kinds of jobs. If they're interested, because they're naturally very good at it. I think people in power need to take more risks than millennials. We keep telling them, you're the future, but you're the future leaders. But we keep saying you're the future leaders, but we're the leaders now. Mm. And so the question is, are we creating environments that allow them to take a healthy risk, fall, and be told to try again? And unfortunately, in too many organizations where layoffs have become such a normal way of doing business, it creates environments where people aren't going to take healthy risk. They'd rather take the safe road because they don't want to find themselves on a short list.
And you can't blame people.
You can't blame people. And I don't blame any particular generation for that. I blame leaders for that of any generation.
Talk about some of the best leaders you've learned from.
A lot of the leaders that I've learned the best lessons from are not people that are famous or well known. Most of them never will be. Many of them wear uniforms. I didn't come from a military family, but I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with folks in the military, and because the stakes are so high, I found there's a humanity that I've struggled to find in business. I've hugged more people in uniforms than I've ever hugged in suits. I've cried with more people in uniforms than I've ever cried with suits. I've sat at dinner tables with generals, and we just started talking and telling stories, and all of us were crying. I've never sat around in a room of CEOs where we started crying together. It's never happened. And so I've learned a lot, and there's a bunch of friends that I've made over the years who I go to when I'm stuck. I can tell you a very personal story. When I was writing Leaders Eat Last, it was the most difficult book to write because every single chapter could have been its own book. It was just a Pandora's box. When I started writing it just went in every direction. And I couldn't understand why none of the biologists hadn't written this book prior. Take the biology of how we are and overlay it on corporate cultures. It's because it was impossible to organize. And so I reached the point where I actually gave up, where I couldn't write anymore. And I remember distinctly, the image is so clear, I was so defeated and couldn't solve this problem that I got up from my desk and went for a long walk, and I was planning my exit. Literally, I was planning my extraction. I figured out that I'd have to give the publisher back their advance because I'd be in breach of contract without a book, that I would suffer humiliation for not finishing this book, but I'd get over it. And I was literally planning emotionally and functionally my exit because I'd given up. I couldn't do it. It had bested me. I don't know why. I called a friend of mine who at the time was in the Air Force Special Forces, used to fly helicopters, Pavlos. I called him up. I don't even think I said hello when he picked up the phone. And I asked him the question, what do you do when you can't do the mission? And as is his nature, he just started telling me a story. He said he started telling me about a mission that they had where it was in Afghanistan, and all of the intelligence said that this was going to be a suicide mission. And it wasn't like a kill Hitler. It wasn't like a kill Hitler mission where we were all going to die, but we'd kill Hitler. It's like we're all going to die, and the mission will fail. Right? The intelligence was crystal clear. And they were preparing their helicopter, and his wingman turns to him and says, what do we do? Like, do we refuse to go? They all had wives and kids, and they all knew the intelligence. And my friend turns to his wingman and says, this is what we signed up for. We go. And so he said to me, you say this book, the thousands of books come out every year, no one will miss yours, because that's what I told him. Is this more or less powerful than Start With Why? I said, it has affected me greater than Start With Why. He says, okay, let me tell you a story. He says, before I met you, I became disillusioned with the Air Force and I was going to leave. And I read this crazy little book called Start With Why, and it re-inspired me, and I've never been happier. Wow. He says, if you're telling me this book is more powerful, you have to do this.
Such a great story.
And he says, this is what you signed up for. You have no choice.
Such a great
Now, his
story.
mission was scrapped, thank goodness, and they never went on the mission. But I turned around, went back to my desk, and never didn't stop writing.
I love that story. Thanks for sharing.
Of
really
course.
Inspirational. So what's it like to have the third most popular TED Talk? I mean, that's saying something. And I don't know how many copies of your book you've sold, but
yeah.
I mean, what do you take from all of this? Why do you think this resonates? Obviously, you're a great orator. You're touching people. I think,
yeah.
But why do you think these topics resonate
so
much?
Well, I think because they're human. I joke that I'm embarrassed that I have a career. There should be no demand for my work. I talk about trust and cooperation. No one should be reading my books or listening to my talks. And so I think what it means is that trust and cooperation are missing and in high demand. And so I think the reason my work resonates is because we want to be treated like humans, we want to feel like humans, we spend more time at work than we do at home, and this whole work-life balance nonsense, it's not based on how much yoga we do or how many days off we have or whether we can disconnect from our technology. The imbalance is that I feel safe at home and I don't feel safe at work. That's the imbalance. No amount of yoga will fix that.
Yeah.
Good corporate culture, strong leadership fixes that. And I believe that fulfillment is a right and not a privilege. We treat it like a privilege. We treat it like some sort of lottery where we go out for dinner with our friends And if someone will say, I love my job, and the rest of us will go, oh, you're so lucky. Like they won something.
The lottery. Yeah.
Right? No, we are entitled. It is a right, not a privilege. It is something we don't earn. We are given. And the irony is, it's better for business. It's better for business.
And to what we said earlier,
it's madness.
okay, so everybody's watching you, they're so inspired. Okay, but I don't work for someone who inspires me.
Yeah.
My companies, but I hear you say it starts with you.
So be the leader you wish you had.
It starts
right?
with you. So
be
what,
the
if
leader
you're
you wish
watching
you had.
right now, what's your homework assignment for anyone who's listening to this?
All great leaders at every level, the ones who are just starting their leadership journey to the ones who are well advanced on their journey, every single one of them is a student of leadership. It is a practice. It is not a rank. It is not an expertise. It is a daily practice, like eating healthy or going to the gym.
So you can always get better.
And-
you can always
and the
try a different way.
And everyone has the capacity to be a leader. It's like being a parent. Everyone has the capacity to have a child. It doesn't mean everybody should raise a child, and doesn't mean everybody wants to raise a child, right? Having the kid is the fun part. Raising the kid is the hard part. Getting the promotions, wonderful. Being the leader, really, really hard work. Everybody has the capacity, but you have to want to be a leader. It is the first criteria. And like I said, you never will be an expert. And all of the people I know, we talk about the subject. We are both interested in the subject. We're both asking each other questions, telling each other stories. We all read books, we read articles, we watch talks and documentaries. We are absolutely consumed and fascinated by the subject, which is why we want to be on this journey. And so anybody who wants to be a leader needs to start being a student of it.
So let's, I think we're getting tons of good questions. I want to try to wrap up. I'm mindful of your time and everyone else's. We've talked about passion, inspiration. Like, what do you like to do for fun?
I love my work. I mean...
So to you, there's not a difference?
No. The fact that we call it work, is really sort of a shame. I struggle to differentiate between weekdays and weekends. And I genuinely, like, it's very, very common. My team will make fun of me that we will leave a meeting or an event or whatever it is, and the first words that will come out of my mouth after we walk out, I'll say, well, that was fun. Not that will lead to more work. That was a good investment, but I say that was fun. It's the same. So now, what do I do outside of my professional world? I'm very active in the art world. I love art and I love creative people. I try and spend a lot of time around them.
That. Any sort of good recommendations or anyone you're following?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be a nut from modern dance. That's my thing. And there's a few dancers and dance companies that I absolutely adore and stay near. Both, some of them very successful and some of them really small. I go to museums. I'm an active artist myself. I like to be around people who see the world differently.
So you're an active artist?
Yeah, I take photographs.
And you share your photos?
Sometimes.
Sometimes?
I like to be around creative people who challenge me, who see the world differently to me, and more than anything, who are so devoted to their passion that they know that they won't get rich, and yet they do it anyway. And they struggle, and yet they do it anyway. And it's thankless, and yet they do it anyway. And I'm so inspired by people who are they just can't imagine doing anything else rather than create. I'm a sucker for that kind of sacrifice.
Well, thank you. I think it's very powerful, the message you're giving to all of us. You've got a new book you're working on. Can you
Yes.
talk about it at all?
Yeah, sure. It's called The Infinite Game. It's all about game theory. What I find so fascinating is there are ways the world works, and if you understand the scenarios in which we operate, we become better at making decisions. And the amazing thing is, the vast majority of companies do not understand the game they're in, which means they're all racing to zero. And if you think about it, right, something like 80% of the Dow Index are companies that are 35 years or younger. And even many of the old companies aren't really old companies. Like JP Morgan Chase, for example, is such a mishmash of conglomerations and hobbled together, and the names they choose, they could have picked any name, but they picked the old name. In other words,
G's probably pretty pure to that. 130 years old, 125.
Is it really the company that Thomas Edison founded? Maybe.
Yeah.
But the point is
a lot more though.
The number of old companies
Yeah.
is really small.
Yeah.
And so my question is,
No, it is. Why?
why are there no old companies?
Yeah.
The railroads went out of business. They were the biggest, most successful companies of the day. Why are there no old companies? And it's because most organizations or leaders of organizations don't actually understand the rules of the world the rules of business in which they operate. And so if you play by the wrong rules, you eventually lose.
So provocative. So when might we catch this?
Well, assuming that I write it in a timely fashion, it'll probably come out sometime next year.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
Simon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've had lots of engagement as people have been checking in.
Good.
Thank you. Where can people learn more? I know you're active on social
Yeah,
media.
I'm in all the usual places. Your Twitters, your Instagrams, your LinkedIn's and Facebooks, and fine and not fine bookstores everywhere, and all that good stuff.
And I want to sort of close with this. I mean, we're talking about change, but really today we're talking about great leadership,
Yeah.
and it starts with you. Anybody can be a leader.
Anyone.
It's not a rank that you are in your organization. Anyone can be a leader.
Amen.
It starts from knowing your why,
It does.
and it starts from inspiring others.
And understanding that what it means to be a leader, like being a parent, has nothing to do with being in charge, but rather it's about taking care of those in your charge.
Well said. Simon, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Beth.
Really
Thank you so
enjoyed
much.
catching up
A
with
joy.
you. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.